Hello, my friend, and welcome. This is your moment. I'm Katarina Miletic, and you are listening to the podcast that will challenge you to think with your soul and believe that your only power is inside you. Hi, Sally. Welcome to This Is Your Moment podcast. Thank you for the honor of being our featured guest.
I am very privileged and honored that you would invite me to participate in your podcast and share a few things that I've learned along the way. It's a real honor to be there as we're also developing our own relationship.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And obviously, the circumstances of our meeting are too special not to share them with other people. You agree? We have met through a storytelling contest that was organized by a person who we both respect and admire a great deal, Pat Quinn. He is a past guest on this podcast as well, as you know. I think although our stories are very personal to each one of us, they reflected a very similar mission. And it was, in fact, you who in one of our conversations called us partners in our mission. So I would love if we begin this off, by you telling us about the magic and the power of the storytelling for creating connection.
I would love to start there. And recently, I re-identified myself actually as a storyteller. Historically, as you know, I'm trained as a veterinarian. I worked in biomedical research my entire career, but I started a consulting business and experienced myself as a consultant and a trainer for many years. But when I really looked at what I was offering life lessons through storytelling. So historically, when you look at the whole idea of storytelling, it has been a means to document and preserve shared values, shared morals, life lessons passing from one generation to another, and has been a fundamental means to record history. And secondly, the essence of the message in a story is immediately remembered. It's not as if you have to memorize the lesson or the content of the story, because as you're visualizing what the storyteller is sharing, you start to experience that as well, or identify with it in your own life. And that's why it's so easy to remember. So if you think of storytelling spans the gambit from drawings on a cave wall to a chat over coffee, you can see that it is a medium of connection for human beings, where we come together and share our similarities and identify and embrace our diversity and our differences. For me, storytelling is a significant part of the human experience, and it's a major contribution to effective communication. That's where I stand on storytelling.
Absolutely. I love that answer, Sally. And I didn't introduce you as Dr. Sally Cleland. You're actually our first PhD here on the podcast, and absolutely a privilege to have you here as a guest. Through your wonderful story that you told in the competition that I mentioned, you highlighted something very important for all of us, and that is self-confidence. So from my experience, this is an underlying struggle for many, many people, and a true source of personal power for all of us who were actually brought up with a strong sense of self-worth. What is your top tip? I know there are many, but what would be your top tip that someone who doesn't feel really confident can do to start turning the things around and feel more empowered from within?
You've asked a tough question, because I'm not totally confident that self-esteem or the maintenance and development of it has a top tip. It's a process and it's an evolution. But if you were going to force me to carve this down to one aspect, I would try to leave your listeners with the idea that self-esteem is the original never-ending story. And by that, I mean, it doesn't suggest that once I have it, I always have it. It is something that I need to work on every single day for a fact. And if I could add to support that is Dr. Nathaniel Branden, who is considered the father of self-esteem, was a psychiatrist and a lecturer. And one of the stories he shared in several of his publications is he was giving a lecture or some presentation on personal accountability and personal responsibility. And in that, the lesson was, you need to take care of yourself. You need to do these things for yourself and by yourself because no one is coming. Mm-hmm. And then some keen student in the lecture hall put up their hand and said, but Dr. Branden, you came. Mm-hmm. And he paused for a moment and he said, well, I came to tell you no one is coming. So my top tip is one of personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. And if you can embrace that you are responsible for staying positive, for building your self-confidence, and all of the other elements that go into maintaining healthy self-esteem, that's my tip. That's the starting point. And then we can kind of go from there.
Wow, Sally, thank you very much. I mean, no kidding. I presented a very tough question there, but you handled that brilliantly. I really am grateful for your answer and the insight, because it really is, that is where you have to start your own accountability. You have to hold your own. There is a wealth of knowledge and skills that people would learn from being connected directly with you. So I'm going to put, obviously, contact details that you wish to share with our audience in the description of this podcast. And I wondered if you want to share a little bit more about your mission and about who are the people who would benefit the most by being coached by you.
Well, currently my priority is to serve professional women sort of in that 50 plus age group, and mainly because that's the demographic that I belong to. Mm-hmm. And these women could be a mixture from the stay-at-home mom or the woman who took time from her career, raised a family, and is now an empty nester. Mm-hmm. Or it could be a woman who has continued in her career pursuits and is thinking about retirement or is already retired and still wants to have a rewarding and fulfilling life of contribution in that latter part of their lives. So I believe, one, because I'm in that group, that I could bring and share my gifts with that group, serve it well, and that I have a firsthand understanding of obstacles and setbacks and struggles that this group might experience. And in terms of what my mission would be, is I would like to say to people who want more respect in their lives, do want to develop that confidence and personal empowerment and accountability, as I mentioned earlier, to guide them, first of all, to accept their inherent value. Secondly, to assist them to develop upon and expand upon their own sense of their competence, to encourage them to define meaning and purpose for their lives, and to persuade them to act responsibly and positively on their view of themselves. Support them to reach their optimal performance. And I'm always somewhat hesitant of using the word performance because it has been well used in the last 20 years, and so there are many definitions of it. But it's however you experience, you want to aim towards your optimal performance and have a happy and contented life, whatever that means for you. So I don't want for your listeners to think that I would not serve anybody outside of my demographic. Certainly I would. But these are the people that I really targeted because I believe I have some credibility there as a starting point. Does that satisfy your question, Katerina?
It does. It does brilliantly and wonderfully. Thank you so much for that. Sally, you always go very deep on a subject, but your character really inspires this playful curiosity inside me each time we connect. You have a light touch, and I love communicating with you. And I wonder if you would answer this question. Let's imagine that you are hosting a dinner party to which you can invite anyone you wish, whether they're dead or alive, it doesn't matter. Who would be the three people that you would choose to have there at your dinner table? And more importantly, why would you choose those people?
Well, I'm going to have to say that if I was actually given carte blanche for a dinner guest list, it wouldn't be limited to three people.
Right.
We have a cadre of philosophers and great thinkers and scientists and humanitarians, and I wouldn't want to leave any of them out. But to be truthful, the first three that come to my mind are JFK, John Kennedy,
Yes.
Marilyn Monroe, and of course my dad. I'll start with my dad because that is one of the stories that connect us very deeply.
Yes.
Is my dad was my first role model, my first mentor, and I believe I hopefully inherited his storytelling gifts, and I utilize his stories as often as I can to honor him. If I'm going to share a life lesson or just have a conversation with someone, so he needs to be at the dinner table. Many of my lessons I learned from him at the dinner table, as I did around my grandparents' dinner table.
Yes.
Certainly in my life experience, that's where, other than campfires, the dinner table was the other scene of great story sharing. JFK, because he was assassinated when I was only about 13 years old, and I was only at that stage just beginning to appreciate his eloquence, his insight, his skills at being an orator and a leader. And I always wondered after that point what he would have brought to the world had he not died in that tragic way. Now, I'm sure like every other human being, he had his weaknesses and his flaws, but what I know of him, I would love for him to be at that dinner table. And my third guest might seem like she doesn't belong in this group, is Marilyn Monroe. The reason I selected Marilyn was I looked at her not in terms of how people put her down, that she wasn't the greatest actress and she wasn't the greatest singer. And, she had various flaws and she obviously had issues with addiction. I would like to have her at my table because my view of Marilyn in many ways is she was a vanguard for women to be in a arena where they weren't fully treated as equal, where you had to claw your way up, probably compromise your principles to do what you wanted to do. And I think she was a very misunderstood person in her arena. And she sadly, like JFK on a different note, had a tragic ending. However, if she was at my dinner table, I would really like to explore how she viewed her life and what she had to do to get where she was, because I believe she wanted to share her gifts too. So it might be a strange person to have at the dinner table. I also thought she brought a lot of style. There, people, you say her name, people have images of her right away. So those are the three that I would think of, Katerina. And if we had an hour just to talk about my dinner guest list, I would have quite a few more.
That is lovely, and I would like to have you on my list of dinner guests for sure, Sally. I mean, you really gave us a thoughtful answer there, and yet again we discovered the similarity with these lessons on the dinner table and the family connection there, that our parents and our fathers in particular have passed on to us. That really fills my heart with joy. So I'm so glad that playful question was it found a way into this conversation. I also wonder, what is your best strategy for staying positive in life, despite the challenging circumstances that we all go through during the course of our life?
I think that's another one, like your earlier question, that it's hard to distill it down to just a couple of things. And I know everybody wants the answer. And if I only do this one thing, you know, things are going to change. And I understand that, because sometimes we're impatient and sometimes we've tried a lot of things that haven't been successful. So we are looking for that one thing to stay positive. And the first thought I have in regards to that question is, what is the alternative? If the alternative to staying positive is being negative, what are the consequences for your life to stay in that negative state? I can't see happiness as part of your life. I can't see joy. I can't see experiencing everything that comes your way, you know, embracing the life lessons I keep referring to. So the opposite of staying positive, in my mind, is not desirable at all. I had the good fortune several times earlier in my life to attend a couple of presentations, some in large conventions and some in more intimate, you know, workshop arenas, where Dr. Robert Schuller was the presenter. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's a minister from the US. He became quite famous for his series of books on, one was titled, When the Going Gets Tough, the Tough Gets Going. So we have a lot of common expressions in today's language that were titles of his books. But he was interviewed one time on this exact point. About staying positive and what do you do when you're down in the dumps and things aren't going well. And when he was sharing this in person, and he was a fellow that had a twinkle in his eye, and you knew something really good was coming when he spoke next. And he said, well, when I get really down, I go into my library and I pick up one of my own books and I start reading it. So he looks to himself and things that he has said and experienced to maintain that degree of positivity. So I guess the most simple answer I would give in this case is, what's the alternative to staying positive? And it's like self-esteem. You do have to work at this, in my mind, every day, because, you know, Hamlet said it. Every day we're faced with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And for some of us, they're really, really, really challenging. And for others, they might just be, I stubbed my toe and I missed the bus. So no matter what the obstacle is, we experience that, and it becomes a challenge to remaining positive. I don't think if you actually are positive, you're not being authentic. I think there is a way every day to look at that. And I know I have many friends in recent years, how they maintain staying positive is by embracing gratitude. And at the beginning, if you're not used to that, it might be hard. Well, what do I have to be thankful for? And you might have to look at it. But it can be something like we shared before this interview began, as easy as, it's a sunny day outside and the birds are singing. There's nothing negative about that. So, I mean, your gratitude can become a direct connection to staying positive. And if I have your permission, I would like to do a little exercise with you. And if your listeners are so inclined, they can join in. Or would you rather do a little exercise when you've concluded with your questions?
I am absolutely game for it now. If you're inspired to do this now, let's do it.
Well, I think I'm inspired because of something I said in answering that question. It twinked in my mind that this might be a good time to do this. So if you, and I would like to encourage your listeners to do this and not just be passive listeners listening to you and I chat about it, but it's up to them. Personal responsibility, right? Anyway, so you just need a little piece of paper and a pen. And what I want you to do, and I'm saying to you, Katerina, but obviously to all your listeners, I want you to think of
if you give me a second, Sally, I'm just going to grab. I didn't come prepared with the.
Hey, that demonstrates to your audience, Katerina, that we didn't set this up.
We did not. I'm going to get the pen because I'm so boxed in. This is a funny note. I told my brother last week in an interview with Jonathan, I said, I made this new setup. Thank you very much for the podcast, and I said I had to literally crawl under the table to come under the lights and under the computer and not to knock the mic down. And I said, I don't know how to go back. And my brother said, well, the same way you came in, only in reverse.
Well, that sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I got a pen and paper.
Okay. So what I would like you to do is think of the most successful person you know or know. So you can either know them personally or just have read about them and, sort of know them from afar. And it can be someone that is living, or it can be someone, that's passed, from history. Doesn't really matter. And you don't have to share their name with me. Just sort of think of that person. And as you're thinking of them, if you do know what they look like, try to envision them to aid in the exercise. And as you consider him or her, I want you to write down the first 3 things that come to mind that you believe are directly related to their success. However you've defined that, and however you came to select them to be that person. The first 3 things. And you can let me know when you've got the 3 things jotted down.
Okay.
Now, I often do this exercise with a large live audience and play a little background music, etc. So it is a very abbreviated version, but I think it's quite telling.
Right. So I have.
You don't
them
have to
down.
share those with me right now, but do you have them?
I do have them. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I want to. I'll share with you first.
I do have it. Here it is. Just as a proof I was right.
Okay, and I have mine. So I'm going to share mine, and then you can share your 3. And as I said, you don't need to tell me who the person is.
Right.
So the most successful person that I know of is enthusiastic, outgoing, and cares about people. So you share your 3 because I'm going to write them down on my notes. So what are your 3 things that come to mind?
Okay. Peace inside the soul. So radiating light as well. That's the second. So first one is very peaceful and calm person when they're talking. They radiate light, absolutely radiate light. And they have the combination of wisdom and kindness that is very, very unique to them.
Okay, alrighty. So I wrote those down so that my list now has 6, because normally, again, going back to an exercise that I do with a larger audience, I usually try to canvas the audience and get like a list of 20 so that we can kind of, look at, the whole list. But we're going to work with the 6, your 3 and my 3. So if we consider that most literature documents that success in life is related to 2 things, if we kind of pare it down to the foundation, and that is skills that you have and attitudes that you embrace. So if we're to look at our list of these 6 and using S for skills and A for attitudes, let's identify the categories. Thinking that skills are like either inborn talent or learned competency, like playing a piano or memorizing the keyboard of a computer is a skill. Whereas an attitude are our perceptions about ourselves and about life. So why don't we do that? You do that to your 3, I'll do it to my 3. So A for attitude, S for skill.
Yep.
So have you done that?
Yes.
Okay, so going back to your list of 3, how have you designated having this sense of peace inside?
Attitude, definitely.
Okay. Radiating light.
Same.
Okay. And wisdom along with kindness.
That is a combination of skill and attitude, because this is a lifelong achievement of this person.
Right. And I would agree. Many times it is a combination of the 2. And on my list, I would say enthusiastic is an attitude. Being outgoing is an attitude, and caring about people is an attitude as well. Now, if you can imagine having a longer list with more people in the room to contribute to this, what is the first thing you see now that we've completed this abbreviated exercise?
I see that most of the things, most of the characteristics that we have actually of our own choosing. So if it is the attitude, it's something that I can absolutely influence. So it's something that I am in charge of. It's not influenced by something that's happening to me.
Right. And well, obviously, if I work in IT, I'm going to have some skills in computer science.
Right.
You can't just have a great attitude, but I love computers, right? You do need some skills. But if you look at whether you're talking about athletes, politicians, doctors, whatever you do, it's generally going to be a combination of the both,
yes,
but usually with attitude leading.
Right.
Because if you have a doctor who's very skilled in the medical sciences, but has terrible bedside manner, you might not want to go to that doctor.
Right.
If you go to a veterinarian who may be very skilled in the science of veterinary medicine, but has no compassion for animals, you're not going to want to interact with them. Do you see where I'm going?
Absolutely.
That there's no doubt there's a place for both,
yes,
but the primary leading thing in success in life is having an attitude. And one of the individuals I mentioned earlier, the Dr. Nathaniel Branden, who's considered the father of self-esteem, he is known for quite a few quotes, aside from the "no one is coming" quote. He's also responsible for saying, of all the judgments we pass in life, none is more important than the judgment we pass on ourselves. So when we look at attitudes, and when you ask me about staying positive, when you ask me about these kinds of things, part of it is how we experience ourselves, and having healthy self-esteem, believing in ourselves, believing in our worth, we bring those gifts to the world. So there's a huge place for having the attitude that I can do it, I am capable, I am worthy, and hopefully others respect me as well. And the other little thing I'll just leave at the end of this exercise part is that in some regards, it may take us years to develop the skills, those learned competencies in our trade. But the attitudes just come, almost like a storytelling. I said before, we know the story, we know the lesson in hearing it. And it's the same in this regard. The attitudes might make a small difference in how we share them, but a huge difference on the receiver. I remember reading many, many years ago that in it's been documented in horse racing and thoroughbred horse racing, that the main difference between a horse that earns $1 million a year in racing and a horse that only earns $100,000 a year is 30 seconds over the year. Mainly because most races are just won by a nose. Right. So we're talking about a fraction of a second that horse has become successful. And I only share that because I don't think we give enough credit and emphasis to how impactful that our attitudes can be in our own life and those that we share with others. So I hope you enjoyed that exercise and can imagine its impact with a bit of a larger audience. And I hope your listeners took a few minutes to do that for themselves.
I do hope so, and I hope that they will share with us in the comments if they have indeed, and then maybe we can respond then together to them, because it's such a profound exercise, and obviously discovering that a lot of the things in our own life and the success as we define it hangs on our attitude primarily. And obviously, yes, in some instances, we will need to gain that skill, but skill is easier to gain when you have the correct attitude. Everything is easier in life.
And one of these sort of unspoken treasures in this exercise is one, I didn't just teach you about attitudes and skills and say that attitudes lead the way. And you freely chose the person you were going to think of these three things. I didn't say, think of Mother Teresa. Yes. You chose the person and you chose the three things. And I can tell you, and hopefully I have enough credibility and trust with you, that I have never done this exercise, whether there's 20 people in the room or 100 people in the room, that we haven't come to the same conclusion.
Right.
That at least 80% of those list of threes are attitudes.
Attitude.
Yeah,
That is beautiful.
So you can just imagine the power when there are more people participating.
Right. Like if we had a dinner table and imagine that we are hosting a party here, wouldn't that be great, Sally?
It would. Especially if once in a while we're having a glass of wine.
Indeed, that would be lovely. Maybe one day that will come to life. Or how do we know?
Right.
As long as we remain open to it, it might lead us to something even more beautiful than this. But thank you for sharing that exercise. That is so memorable and so valuable as well.
And please, Katerina, use it yourself. Like if there's programs or challenges or any type of opportunity that you have where that exercise serves the message you're delivering, please use it. Just adapt it to what it is that's the theme of what you're doing.
Yes, it drives a powerful message home. So thank you so much for sharing that. I was going to ask you earlier, although you never struck me as somebody who would accept to live with regrets, is there anything that you would regret and that you would actually suggest somebody who is going through a similar choice in life right now at this moment, to act in a different way than you perhaps did back then?
Well, this is a bit of a challenging one for me because I don't think it's really healthy to live with regret, but I do believe that regret can be part of the human experience. We make choices and decisions. Some are going to be powerful and impact our lives in really great positive ways, and others may not. And I know the current vernacular is rather than living with regrets and something that didn't turn out well, look for the lesson. And I think that's the underlying principle. But I can be very honest with you in terms of regret. If I was to select a regret, sadly for me, it was the selection of the man I married. And I'm now divorced. My regret is I didn't really listen to myself. I didn't listen to my own internal dialogue. There were some cues that this might not be the partner for me. I was aware of those red flags, more or less ignored those red flags, and went ahead. And so I have the regret. But any decision is like a fork in the road. You go left or right. Yes. And in having gone left, you chose to not go right. Now you can come back maybe to the fork in the road and make the pivot and go right, but that's a different time. If you come back that path to make a different decision, the path is different already. So you know that. So the regret is I didn't listen to myself and I didn't pay attention to those things. And for me, the regret is during the course of the short time we were together, I allowed this person to discourage me from things I wanted to do that I believed in. And I can't even explain to you how I got to that position where I would act quite differently now, but that's where I was. So to be honest, it's a personal regret. It was in that selection. So you're free to edit that out if that doesn't serve the purpose of our interview.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that is a very frank answer. And yeah, I didn't expect that you would go there, but this is yet another thing that we do have in common, Sally, right? I've been married for 15 years after I divorced the person who was very much I felt that I am altering myself in order to stay in that relationship. And then no longer that became acceptable to me because we had 2 children and I thought I am sending the wrong example. Where my ex-husband saw that as, normal way of living, he didn't see that it was anything wrong there. But I felt that my character has now come to the place where I had to alter myself. So yeah, that was a big warning sign. But as you said, I did not listen to those early subtleties that inside me. Perhaps if I had listened, they would have guided me the right way.
And what was surprising to me is in other areas of my life outside of my marriage, I was listening to cues and I was, sort of acting as my authentic self. But in this relationship, Sally got lost. So I was not attending to things like my positivity and my personal confidence and things like that. So I suppose I could drag some lessons out of that.
Yes.
But to tell you the honest truth, I wish I didn't have to learn those lessons that way.
Me too. But that leads us next to the next question nicely, because sometimes in life we come to the point where we say, oh, this did not turn out how I planned it. So what in the light of what we are talking about, what turned into a lesson from experience that you didn't plan it to be a lesson, but became a great lesson in your life? If you care to share that with us.
Well, I think, like the guests at the dinner party, this one could be a longer discussion, but the first one that comes to my mind, and not only from our discussion today, but from our discussions outside of this interview, that I speak highly of my father, and many of my lessons came from interacting with him. But the one thing that came to my mind, and I didn't know it was a lesson at the time, I had just turned 18. And at the time in the province of Saskatchewan, I was old enough to vote. I was deemed by the government as being an adult, etc. So, and this wasn't said subtly. This was a sit down, Sally, I have to talk to you. And so my dad said, today the government of our province recognizes you as an adult. So you're an adult now in our family. So there's no more curfews. Your mother and I aren't going to set any restrictions on you. You're responsible for your life. Go out, and live it, and etc. The thing I often say, like Fred Flintstone, it was the yabba dabba do sort of thing. And I wasn't thinking about this as a lesson. My first thought is, oh, yay, freedom! I can do what I want. And what he didn't say, and this is where the lesson started to evolve, was, well, I'm responsible for those choices and decisions. So something as simple as going out on a date with someone, and I get out on the date and I think, oh, I don't want to stay on this date. I could often say, oh, I've got a curfew. My dad expects me home, and end it. That was not the case. I was going to have to be responsible myself to end the date and get home. Or if I went out on a school night, because by this time I was going into university, and didn't do my homework, then I show up in class the next day without any homework. So my lesson came by experiencing what that freedom meant. What it meant was you're free to choose what you do, as well as the consequences, the good ones and the not so good ones. So I don't know if my dad sat me down with that lesson in mind, but that's how it turned out. It went from total freedom, oh no, I've got total freedom, to now I've got to be responsible for this total freedom. So that's the lesson that I said. But again, I could give you more. I think, Katerina, you and I could sit down and write a book about this topic.
Absolutely. I know the lessons that we learned and collected. I tell you, it's quite an eye opener, and
especially the ones we don't know at the time are a lesson.
Yes.
For me and my dad at that moment, I thought we were just having a conversation. I didn't know there was a lesson in there.
Right. And those are the best ones.
Yeah.
Well, Sally, I love your wisdom and I love your spark inside you. I really wish that this conversation never ended because I could carry on talking with you. And I hope that we will perhaps, and I have this feeling inside, I don't know, you tell me if you have a similar feeling, that we might be co-creating something together in the future. There is this strong connection, and how our paths sort of came to that point of meeting that suggests to me that there is more to explore here.
I believe so as well. And even if we don't have the full vision of what that looks like, I think we both have a sense that that's part of our paths. And even my very sort of casual comment to you that you brought up from the storytelling competition about sort of our missions and being on the same path, I intuitively felt that. And you and I have not met in person in the real world.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, we haven't.
Yeah.
True. That didn't stop us to be open to this friendship developing. Right. I am absolutely honored to have had you here as a guest, and I hope you return really soon. Thank you.
I hope so too. And I know you sort of titled this interview about, was it honoring the miracle or the miracle of existence? May I leave you with one sentence that tags into the title you gave me?
Yes.
And again, I'm going to defer to my father. The mantra he served, that served him well and that has served me moving forward, is to honor each moment, for in it you experience a miracle, the miracle of existence.
Beautiful. And it was exactly that beautiful quote from your dad that you shared with me that I wanted to honor both your father and mine and our friendship in becoming by using that as a title for this interview. Thank you so much for the blessing.
And thank you for titling this, because I think collectively between the two of us, we're honoring both our fathers.
I'm sure they're smiling at us right now. Thank
you.
So
many thanks again, much appreciation and gratitude for not only our growing friendship, but for potential opportunities to collaborate and for including me in your interview. Thank you so much, Katerina.
You're so welcome. I love you, Sally.
Me too. Have a great day. Call me anytime.